The only battle you can actually lose is the one you stop fighting. You're here because something in you is tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that sits in your chest when you wake up. The kind that whispers, maybe this isn't worth it anymore. Maybe I've given enough. Maybe it's time to let go. You've been pushing and nothing's moving. You've been building and nothing's rising. You've been believing and nothing's changing. And somewhere between the effort and the emptiness, a thought crept in. A thought that feels like relief but tastes like surrender. What if I just stopped? That thought doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Because you've been carrying weight that no one sees. Fighting battles that no one names. Bleeding in places that don't leave visible scars. And the hardest part isn't the fight itself. It's the loneliness of it. It's showing up every single day to something that hasn't shown up for you yet. It's the gap between what you're pouring out and what you're seeing return. It's the exhaustion of starting over again and again and again. You look around and everyone else seems to have it figured out. Their breakthrough came, their door opened, their season shifted. But you're still here, still waiting, still working, still wondering if you missed your turn somewhere, if you're doing it wrong, if you're the problem. And that wondering turns into something heavier. It turns into shame. The shame of still being in the starting place while others are finishing. The shame of still struggling with what you thought you'd have conquered by now. The shame of being behind some invisible timeline that everyone else seems to be on but you. Behind the expectations you set for yourself 3 years ago. Behind the version of you that you promised you'd become. And that shame doesn't just sit there quietly. It speaks. It tells you that effort without results is just wasted time. That faith without evidence is just foolishness. That maybe the universe is trying to tell you something. Maybe the resistance is a sign. Maybe the closed doors mean stay out. Maybe you're forcing something that was never meant for you. So you start negotiating with yourself. You start building the case for why quitting makes sense. You call it being realistic, being mature, being wise enough to know when to walk away. You dress it up in language that sounds like growth. I'm choosing myself. I'm protecting my peace. I'm letting go of what's not serving me. And some of that might even be true. But underneath it, there's something else. There's fear. Fear that if you keep going and it still doesn't work, you'll have no more excuses, no more hope, no more story to tell yourself about what could have been if you had just tried harder. Because right now you can quit and keep the fantasy. You can walk away and tell yourself it would have worked if you had stayed. You can preserve the possibility. But if you stay and it fails, then what? Then you're just someone who gave everything and it wasn't enough. And that thought is terrifying. So quitting starts to feel like protection, like the smart move, like mercy. But here's what that voice doesn't tell you. Quitting doesn't end the pain. It relocates it. It moves it from your hands to your heart, from your today to your tomorrow, from your effort to your regret. Because you can live with the exhaustion of trying. People do it every day. What you can't live with is the haunting of almost the ghost of what you abandoned. The echo of who you could have become if you had just held on a little longer. You've felt that before, haven't you? That ache of something you walked away from too soon. That relationship you didn't fight for. That dream you didn't chase. That version of yourself you didn't become because the road got hard and you got tired. And now it lives in you like a low-grade fever. Always there, never quite healing. A permanent reminder that you let go before the story finished. And maybe you're thinking that's dramatic. That quitting one thing won't define your whole life. But it's never just one thing. It's a pattern. It's a precedent. It's teaching yourself that when it gets hard, you leave. When it gets unclear, you quit. When it stretches you past comfortable, you retreat. And every time you do that, the quitting gets easier. The threshold gets lower. Until you become someone who starts everything and finishes nothing. Someone with a graveyard of half-built dreams and almost stories. You don't want to be that person. I know you don't. Because if you did, you wouldn't still be here. You wouldn't be listening to a voice telling you not to give up. You'd have already closed this and moved on. But something in you is still fighting, still reaching, still believing that maybe, just maybe, you're closer than you think. And that something isn't naive. It's not delusional. It's the part of you that knows. The part that remembers what you're made for. The part that refuses to let you trade your destiny for temporary relief. But that part is tired too. It's been carrying you for so long. It's been the voice of reason when everything else screamed run. It's been the flicker of hope when everything else went dark. And it's asking you a question right now. How much longer? How much more can I give before you finally listen? Before you finally trust? Before you finally stop looking for permission to quit and start looking for reasons to stay? Because the reasons are there. They're just buried under the disappointment, under the fatigue, under the voices of people who gave up on their own dreams and now can't stand to watch you chase yours, under the comparison, under the fear, under the lies you've been telling yourself about what your struggle means. Your struggle doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're building something real, something that requires you to become different, something that can't be microwaved or shortcutted or hacked, something that only exists on the other side of endurance. And endurance isn't sexy. It's not a highlight reel. It's not something people celebrate until it's over. It's the anonymous hours, the unseen repetition, the private discipline, the showing up when no one's watching and nothing's changing. It's the most unglamorous part of every success story. But it's also the most necessary, because everyone wants the harvest, but no one wants to be the seed. And being the seed means going into the dark. It means being buried. It means the pressure of soil and the waiting in silence and the complete invisibility of growth happening where no one can see it. You're in that place right now, underground, in the dark, wondering if anything's even happening, wondering if you're growing or just rotting. And you can't tell the difference because both feel like death, both feel like the end. But one is the end of what you were, so you can become what you're meant to be. And the other is just the end. And the only way to know which one you're in is to keep going, to let the process finish, to trust that the same force that buried you is the same force that's growing you. You need to understand something that will change everything. Quitting isn't a moment. It's a decision that echoes through every timeline of your life that never gets to exist. Every version of you that needed this victory to be born dies with your surrender. And you don't just lose what could have been, you lose who you could have become. The seed doesn't know when it's going to break through the surface. It has no countdown, no progress bar, no guarantee that the dirt above it isn't 10 feet thick. All it knows is push. And it doesn't push because it sees the light. It pushes because pushing is what seeds do. It's coded into its design. Quitting would mean betraying its own nature, going against the fundamental instruction written into its existence. And when you quit, you do the same thing. You override your design. You reject the blueprint. You tell the force that created you that it made a mistake. Think about the lion cub learning to hunt. It fails constantly. It miscalculates distance. It gets outrun by prey. It goes hungry over and over and over. Do you know what never happens? The cub doesn't sit down in the grass and decide hunting isn't for him. It doesn't look at the older lions eating and think maybe I'm just not built for this. It doesn't quit. Because quitting means death. And on some level that cub knows that its survival is directly connected to its persistence. That the difference between eating and starving is simply refusing to stop trying. You are that cub. Your dream, your purpose, your calling, whatever you want to call it, that's your prey. And you've missed it a dozen times, 100 times. You've watched it get away. You felt the frustration of being so close and still coming up empty. But you're still alive, which means you get another attempt, another chance, another hunt. The only way you actually lose is if you stop hunting. If you convince yourself you're not made for this. If you let the failures rewrite your identity. But here's what you need to know about identity. You are not defined by your current results. You are defined by your design. And your design is not breakable. It can be buried. It can be ignored. It can be doubted. But it cannot be erased. You were manufactured with specific capacity, specific resilience, specific purpose. And just like a phone doesn't stop being a phone because the battery is low, you don't stop being who you are because your energy is depleted. You just need to be recharged, not replaced. The pottery doesn't understand the wheel. It doesn't know why it's spinning, why there's pressure, why hands keep pushing into it, reshaping it, refusing to let it settle into comfort. All the clay knows is intensity, discomfort, constant motion. And if the clay could speak, it would probably beg to be left alone, to be taken off the wheel, to stop the process. But the potter knows something the clay doesn't. The clay isn't being tortured. It's being formed. And if it's removed from the wheel too early, it doesn't become what it was meant to be. It becomes nothing, a lump, potential without form, purpose without shape. You are on the wheel right now, and I know it's uncomfortable. I know the pressure feels personal. I know the spinning is disorienting, but you're not being destroyed. You're being formed. And the moment you quit is the moment you guarantee you'll never become the masterpiece. You'll just be the story of what could have been if the clay had stayed on the wheel a little longer. There's a place every dream passes through, a valley between the start and the finish, between the vision and the manifestation, between the promise and the proof. And this valley has a specific atmosphere. It's where excitement dies and discipline is born, where motivation fades and commitment is tested, where the crowd thins out and you realize how few people actually finish what they start. Most people never make it through the valley. They turn around. They go back to the beginning. They quit. And they quit because the valley doesn't feel like progress. It feels like punishment, like you're moving but getting nowhere, like you're working but nothing's working, like the gap between where you are and where you're going is actually getting wider instead of narrower. And in that feeling, a lie takes root. The lie that says if it was meant to be, it wouldn't be this hard. If this was your path, it would flow. If this was your purpose, you'd know. You'd feel it. You'd see signs. But that's not how purpose works. Purpose isn't a feeling. It's a fight. It's not a smooth road. It's a climb. And the steeper the climb, the thinner the air, the harder the breathing. That's not evidence you're on the wrong mountain. That's evidence you're going higher than most people are willing to go. That's evidence the view from the top is going to be worth it. That's evidence you're being prepared for something most people will never experience because they turned back when it got hard. You know what kills more dreams than failure? Comfort. The good that becomes the enemy of the right. The decent job that keeps you from the great calling. The okay relationship that prevents the extraordinary one. The safe choice that blocks the significant one. You settle into good enough and call it wisdom. You accept fine and call it maturity. You stop reaching and call it contentment. But deep down you know you were made for more. You know there's a version of your life that's bigger, richer, fuller, truer. And the only thing standing between you and that life is your willingness to walk away from the comfortable one. But walking away feels like loss. Like you're giving up what you have for what might never come. So you stay. You negotiate. You tell yourself that wanting more is greedy. That you should be grateful for what you have. And gratitude is important. But gratitude for the season you're in shouldn't trap you there. It should fuel you to grow into the next one. A seed can be grateful for the soil without staying buried forever. Here's what most people don't understand about seasons. Winter isn't punishment. It's preparation. The tree doesn't lose its leaves because it's dying. It sheds them because it's surviving. Because keeping them would drain resources it needs to make it through the cold. So it lets go. It stands bare. It looks dead. But underground, in the invisible places, the roots are going deeper, strengthening, expanding, getting ready for a spring that hasn't arrived yet but is absolutely coming. You're in winter right now. And winter is brutal. It's cold and long and lonely. Nothing's blooming. Nothing's growing, at least not visibly. And everyone walking past your life sees a bare tree and assumes nothing's happening. They don't see the roots. They don't see the preparation. They just see the absence of fruit and make judgments about your potential. But you're not growing for them. You're not rooting for an audience. You're rooting because that's what trees do in winter. They go deeper. And when spring comes, and it will come, the depth of your roots will determine the height of your growth. Before I continue, answer one question honestly. Have you ever walked away from something right before it was about to break open? Have you ever quit in the final hour, the last round, the ninth inning, not knowing you were one decision away from everything changing? If you're still listening, something inside you is waking up. Something inside you recognizes the truth, even when your mind is screaming lies. Something deeper than logic, older than your doubt, stronger than your exhaustion. That something is your design talking. And it's saying stay. It's saying push. It's saying you didn't come this far to only come this far. Let me tell you about the craftsman and the sword. He's been working on this blade for months, heating the metal, folding it, hammering it, heating it again. The process is repetitive, exhausting. And most people watching would have quit weeks ago. They would have said the sword is good enough, sharp enough, strong enough. But the craftsman knows something they don't. He knows that good enough dulls on the first real battle. He knows that sharp enough breaks under pressure. He knows that strong enough isn't strong enough when everything's on the line. So he keeps going. He works the metal through one more fire, one more fold, one more strike of the hammer. His arms are screaming. His back is aching. Every part of him wants to stop, wants to call it finished, wants to rest. But he doesn't, because he's not making a decorative piece for a wall. He's making a weapon for war. And in war, the difference between a blade that's 95% complete and 100% complete is the difference between life and death. The last 5% isn't about perfection. It's about survival. You are that blade right now. And the hammering you're feeling, the heat you're enduring, the repetitive pressure that feels like it's never going to end, that's not breaking you. That's completing you. That's taking you from good enough to unbreakable. And if you quit now, you'll be a sword that looks finished but shatters the first time it's tested. You'll be someone who almost made it. Someone who was close. Someone who gave up in the final strokes because you couldn't see how near the end really was. The marathon runner at mile 24 understands this. His body stopped cooperating miles ago. His legs are concrete. His lungs are fire. Every step is an argument with his mind about why stopping makes sense. And logically, it does make sense. The pain is real. The exhaustion is real. And no one would blame him for walking, for slowing down, for calling it good enough that he made it this far. But he knows something that his body doesn't. He knows the finish line exists. He knows that 2 more miles of pain is temporary, but quitting is permanent. He knows that his future self will never forgive him if he stops now. So he runs on something other than strength. He runs on decision, on refusal, on the part of him that's bigger than his feelings. And when he crosses that line, it's not his legs that carried him. It's his will. It's the thing in him that said no to every impulse to quit. That's the thing in you right now. That thing that brought you here. That thing that keeps you searching for a reason to continue when 1,000 reasons to quit are screaming louder. That thing is not your weakness. It's your superpower. There's a story about an inventor that most people don't know. Not Edison, though his story is similar. This man was working on a design that everyone said was impossible. He tried 847 different combinations. 847 failures. His money ran out. His colleagues left. His family begged him to move on, but he couldn't. Not because he was stubborn, because he knew. Deep in his core, he knew the design was sound. He knew the solution existed. He just hadn't found the right sequence yet. Attempt 848 changed everything. Not because the universe finally rewarded his persistence, because persistence finally led him to the answer that was always there. And when people asked him how he kept going, he said something that should be written on every wall of every person who's thinking about quitting. He said, I never failed. I just found 847 ways that didn't work. And each one brought me closer to the one that did. You need to hear that. You need to let it sink past your disappointment and into your belief system. Your attempts that didn't work weren't wasted. They were data. They were education. They were necessary steps in the direction of the solution. You're not starting over every time something doesn't work. You're eliminating options. You're narrowing the field. You're getting closer. And the only way you actually fail is if you stop before you find the combination that unlocks everything. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that's easy to say when you're not the one bleeding, when you're not the one exhausted, when you're not the one watching everyone else win while you're still grinding in obscurity. And you're right. It is easy to say, but it's also true. And truth doesn't become less true because it's hard to live. It becomes more necessary. You don't see it yet, but you're closer than you've ever been. You don't feel it yet, but you're stronger than you were yesterday. You don't believe it yet, but you're becoming the person who can handle what's coming. And what's coming isn't just the reward. It's the responsibility. It's the platform. It's the influence. It's the version of your life that requires a version of you that doesn't exist yet. And that version is being built right now in the struggle, in the uncertainty, in the valley where no one's watching and nothing's working and you're still showing up anyway. That's the miracle. Not that you're winning, that you're still here, still fighting, still believing, still refusing to let your circumstances rewrite your destiny. Because your destiny was never about your circumstances. It was about your decision, your choice, your daily, hourly, moment by moment refusal to let the hard thing become the final thing. You grow in the invisible places. You develop in the dark. You strengthen in the silence. And none of that makes good content. None of that trends. None of that gets celebrated until it's over. But that doesn't make it less real. The tree doesn't need applause to grow. The seed doesn't need an audience to push through soil. The lion doesn't need validation to hunt. They do what they were made to do because their design demands it. And so does yours. Your design is not negotiable. It's not dependent on how you feel. It's not conditional on whether things are going well. You were built to endure, to persist, to outlast. And every time you think you can't go anymore and then you do, you prove that your capacity is bigger than your comfort zone ever let you believe. You expand. You grow. You become evidence that the impossible is just the untried. Think about every time you thought you couldn't and then you did. Every time you thought you'd break and you bent instead. every time you thought it was over and it was just the end of a chapter, not the book. You have a history of surviving things you thought would kill you. You have a track record of making it through. And that track record isn't luck. It's proof. Proof that you're designed for this. Proof that you're stronger than your strongest excuse. Proof that quitting isn't in your DNA, even when it's in your thoughts. So when the voice comes, and it will come, the voice that says you've done enough, you've tried enough, you've suffered enough, you need to have an answer ready. And that answer isn't a feeling, because feelings change. That answer is a decision, a line in the sand, a commitment that doesn't bend when the pressure increases. The answer is, I didn't come this far to turn around now. I didn't survive everything behind me to surrender to what's in front of me. I didn't endure the valley to quit before the mountaintop. I'm finishing what I started, not because it's easy, because it's mine. There's a version of you in the future looking back at this exact moment, this exact conversation, this exact decision point. And that version of you has something to say, something urgent, something that can't wait. Listen closely. This is the hinge. This is the moment your entire story turns on. Everything you become, everything you build, everyone you impact, it all traces back to right now. To whether you stayed or whether you left. To whether you pushed or whether you folded. To whether you trusted your design or believed your doubt. That future version of you exists in one of two timelines. In one timeline, you quit. You walked away. You told yourself it was the smart decision, the mature decision, the self-caring decision. And maybe for a few days, even a few weeks, it felt like relief. The pressure lifted. The weight came off. You could breathe again. But then something else moved in, something quieter but heavier. Regret. Not the loud kind, the subtle kind. The kind that shows up in random moments. When you see someone else doing what you gave up on. When you hear a song that reminds you of who you were trying to become. When you're alone at night and the honest thoughts come. In that timeline, you spend years wondering, what if I had stayed? What if I had pushed through just one more week, one more month, one more season? What if I was one decision away and I walked away from it? You'll never know. And that not knowing becomes a permanent resident in your mind. It colors everything. Every new beginning carries the shadow of the thing you didn't finish. Every new dream fights against the evidence that you quit before. You become someone who starts but doesn't complete. Someone who has potential but not proof. Someone who tells stories about what could have been instead of what actually is. And the cruelest part of that timeline isn't even your own loss. It's everyone else's. Because your breakthrough wasn't just for you, the thing you're building, the person you're becoming, the victory you're fighting for. It was never meant to be private. It was meant to be a door, a proof, a testimony for everyone behind you who's in their own valley wondering if they should quit. Your endurance was supposed to become their evidence. Your victory was supposed to become their hope. But you quit, so they never see it. They never hear it. They never receive the very thing your struggle was meant to produce. But there's another timeline. The one where you stay, where you dig deeper than you thought you could, where you outlast the doubt, the exhaustion, the voices, the circumstances, where you make the decision that quitting is no longer an option, not because you're strong enough, but because your purpose is bigger than your pain. In this timeline, something shifts, not immediately, maybe not even soon, but it shifts. The break comes, the door opens, the pieces align, and suddenly you're standing in the answer to prayers you prayed months ago, years ago. You're holding the fruit of seeds you planted in the dark when no one was watching and nothing was growing. And in that moment, you understand. You understand why it took so long, why it was so hard, why you had to become different to receive it. Because what you're holding isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. And the old you, the version of you that existed before the valley, couldn't have handled it, would have misused it, would have broken under the weight of it. But this version of you, the one forged in pressure, shaped by endurance, refined by fire, this version can steward it, can honor it, can multiply it. In this timeline, your story becomes a weapon, not against people, but against hopelessness, against the lie that hard means wrong, against the belief that if God loved you, it wouldn't hurt this much. Your scars become maps. Your struggle becomes strength. Your testimony becomes the thing that keeps someone else from quitting. And you realize that every moment you wanted to give up but didn't was preparing you for this, for the platform, for the impact, for the responsibility of being living proof that endurance wins. So which timeline do you want? Which version of your future are you choosing right now? Because it is a choice. It's not about your circumstances. Those might not change for a while. It's not about your feelings. Those are going to fluctuate daily. It's about your decision, your commitment, your refusal to let the hard thing become the final thing. And once you make that decision, truly make it, not as a hope, but as a non-negotiable. Everything changes, not around you, in you. And that internal shift is what eventually creates the external one. You are not someone who quits. Read that again. You are not someone who quits. That is not your design. That is not your story. That is not your identity. That is not your ending. You are someone who endures, who persists, who outlasts, who shows up when it's hard, who stays when it's unclear, who fights when it's dark. That's who you are. Not because you feel like it, because your design demands it, because your purpose requires it, because your destiny depends on it. And I need you to understand what your quitting actually costs. It's not just your dream. It's the person you were meant to become. Every challenge you're facing right now is trying to develop something in you. Patience, resilience, faith, character, strength, wisdom. And if you quit, you don't just lose the goal. You lose the growth. You stay the same person with the same capacity, facing the same limitations. You shortcut your own development. You abort your own evolution. You trade who you could become for the comfort of staying who you are. But comfort is a thief. It steals your potential in exchange for temporary ease. It robs your future to pay for your present. And the bill always comes due. Because a life built on comfort eventually becomes a prison. You wake up one day and realize you're not living, you're just existing. You're not growing, you're just maintaining. You're not building, you're just surviving. And somewhere deep inside, the real you, the one that got buried under excuses and fear and exhaustion, that version is screaming, begging for a chance, begging you to stop choosing comfort and start choosing courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more. Your purpose matters more than your fear. Your calling matters more than your comfort. Your destiny matters more than your doubt. And when you live from that place, when you make decisions from that priority, you become unstoppable. Not invincible. You'll still get hit. You'll still hurt. You'll still have days where you want to quit. But you won't, because you've decided. And decision is the death of indecision. It's the end of negotiation. It's the closing of the exit door. Right now, in this moment, you need to close that door. You need to burn the bridge back to quitting. You need to remove the option of retreat. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's necessary. As long as quitting is on the table, you'll keep looking at it. Keep considering it. Keep flirting with it. But when you remove it entirely, when you make the decision that you're finishing what you started, no matter what, your energy stops being divided. Your focus stops being fractured. Everything in you aligns toward one direction, forward. The seed doesn't have a backup plan. It pushes up or it dies. The lion doesn't have an alternative. It hunts or it starves. They succeed because failure isn't an option. And when failure isn't an option, success becomes inevitable. Not easy, not quick, but inevitable. Because you will try every possible way. You will adapt. You will pivot. You will learn. You will adjust. You will keep going until you find the path that works. And that relentless forward motion, even when it's slow, even when it's painful, that's what separates the people who make it from the people who don't. You're going to make it. I know you don't feel it. I know the evidence isn't there yet, but you're going to make it. Not because you're special, though you are. Not because you're talented, though you might be. You're going to make it because you're stubborn enough to refuse to quit. Because you're desperate enough to keep seeking. Because you're brave enough to keep believing even when belief feels foolish. And that combination, desperation plus faith plus refusal to quit, that's the formula, that's the code. That's how ordinary people do extraordinary things. Your story isn't over. It's not even close. This chapter, this season, this valley, it's brutal. It's long. It's testing every part of you. But it's not the end. It's the middle. It's the messy part. The part no one talks about. The part that doesn't make it into the highlight reel. But it's the most important part. Because the middle is where people quit. The middle is where dreams die. The middle is where the strong get separated from the interested. And you're still here. Still in it. Still fighting. Which means you're stronger than you think. You lose the moment you quit. But you win the moment you decide quitting isn't an option anymore. And that decision doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be public. It just has to be real. Real enough to change how you wake up tomorrow. Real enough to shift what you tolerate from yourself. Real enough to make you move even when you don't want to. That decision is available right now, not later. Not when you feel better. Not when circumstances improve. Now, while it's still hard, while you're still tired, while the outcome is still uncertain, that's when the decision matters most. So decide, choose your timeline, choose your identity, choose your ending, and then live like someone who's already made it, Not in arrogance, but in faith, in knowing, in the quiet confidence that what you're building in the dark is going to astound people in the light, that your struggle has a purpose, that your pain has a point, that your endurance is creating something that can't be created any other way. Decide. And then become undeniable proof that the only way you actually lose is if you quit. And you're not going to do that. Not today, not ever, because that's not who you are. If this message spoke to your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. And if you want more messages that grow your soul, subscribe, because your journey has just begun. You're standing at the edge right now. One side is the familiar pull of surrender. The other is the unknown territory of one more day, one more step, one more attempt. And I know which side feels easier. I know which side your body is leaning toward. But your body doesn't get the final vote. Your feelings don't get to write the ending. The part of you that's still listening, still hoping, still believing, even when belief feels ridiculous, that part gets to decide. And that part knows the truth. It knows you didn't survive everything you've survived to give up now. It knows the walls you're hitting on stop signs, they're tests. It knows that every person who ever did anything worth remembering had a moment exactly like this one. A moment where quitting made sense and continuing seemed insane. And the only difference between the ones you remember and the ones you don't is what they chose when nothing made sense anymore. Choose to stay, not because you see the end, because you trust the design, not because it feels good, because it means something, not because it's easy, because it's yours. Your fight, your story, your breakthrough waiting on the other side of your refusal to quit. The moment you give up is the moment you lose. But every moment you stay is a moment you're winning, even if it doesn't look like it, even if no one sees it, even if you can't feel it. You're winning right now by still being here, by still listening, by still considering the possibility that your best days aren't behind you, but ahead of you. That's not optimism. That's warfare. That's you fighting for your future when your present is trying to convince you there isn't one. Keep fighting, keep pushing, keep refusing to let your temporary circumstances dictate your permanent identity. You don't lose when you fall. You don't lose when you fail. You don't lose when you hurt. You only lose when you quit. And you're not going to do that. Not because you're perfect, because you're purposed. Not because you have all the answers, because you have enough faith to take the next step. That's all you need. Not the whole staircase, just the next step. Take it. And then take another. And another. Until one day you look back and realize you climbed a mountain you thought would kill you. And it didn't. It made you.